Some people like that, you know. Request for CDs. Oh, this is a CD request. Must be in the wrong box. But it's so wonderful that you wrote this anyway. I'm not going to find fault with you for putting it in the wrong box. Venerable Ajahn, if one has superpower consciousness and psychic powers follows, will this not lead one astray with self-conceit, egoism, and become wayward? Can you please comment? Sadhu and thank you, Venerable Ajahn. Do you think I know who wrote that question? No, but if you have superpower mindfulness and you start having conceit, you will not be able to maintain that superpower mindfulness. Actually, conceit, I should have mentioned this yesterday on the point of the talk of anatta, but conceit in Buddhism is very powerful, very beautiful. It's the three conceits. The first is what most Western people think is conceit. It means I think I'm better than you. That's only the first type of conceit. The second type of conceit is thinking I'm worse than somebody else. In Buddhism, that's the same as thinking you're better, thinking you're worse. That too is being conceited. When I heard that, that's brilliant. How right the Buddha was. Sometimes we only think that being better is conceit, but thinking we're worse is also conceit. Have you ever had that inferiority complex, either at school or in this meditation retreat? You see the person sitting next to you, they sit so straight. They sit there for hours. It's not fair. And that's conceit, thinking you're worse. And also the third conceit is thinking one is equal. Wow, that really blew me away. All this thing about all beings are created equal. That, according to Buddhism, is conceit. Brilliant. Because you don't measure yourself at all. We're not equal. We're different. We're not the same. We're equally valuable. We've got equal potential. We've all got Buddha nature. But we're not the same. That's just conceit. So that way, so the Buddha was brilliant. He was saying, don't measure yourself against others at all. You are immeasurable. How can you judge yourself against somebody else? It's like in a school. How can you judge grade 12 children against grade 1 kids? Are the people in grade 12 better than the grade 1 children? Of course not. It's just they've been in school longer, that's all. The kid who comes top of the class, the kid who comes bottom of the class, is the kid who comes top better than the kid who comes bottom? No, they're equally valuable. This is, again, one of the stories. I'm just going to pause for some water. There's a monk in Thailand who I think he's passed away now. When I heard his story, it was just such an inspiring story. Because this child, when he went to grade 1 in his school, after 1 year, he couldn't pass. He was so unintelligent or so stupid. After 1 year in grade 1, the teacher, just with the best will in the world, just could not pass him. He flunked grade 1. I don't know how you can flunk grade 1. Maybe you're not good at plasticine, or I don't know what it is, or drawing or whatever, but he couldn't pass. So he had to do it again. He repeated grade 1. For a second year he failed. And the teacher, no, he's not able to go up to grade 2. So they gave him a third try. 3 years in grade 1. And after the third year, no, you just can't set him up. He didn't pass grade 1 with 3 tries. So there's no point in trying again, so they threw him out of school. He was obviously just not competent. And even in the villages in Thailand, the villagers realized if you can't even pass grade 1, you probably won't be able to learn how to plough the fields. He's actually useless. So what they did then was most useless people like that in Thailand, they would send them to the monastery and ordain them as a novice. It's not all novices become novices because of that. But he went to one... Sorry about that, I apologise. He went to a village monastery. And like most of these monasteries, the monks there, even if in the old days, even if they didn't keep all their rules completely, 100%, they were still very kind and compassionate people. And the abbot of this monastery just spent so much time and effort with this young man. He really tried even more than any school teacher could to try and teach his kid how to read, how to write, how to do simple sums. But the child was just so hopeless. After another few years, even the abbot of the monastery just don't know what to do with the fellow. So as a very, very last resort, he sent them to the forest monastery. Now, not all monks who go into a forest monastery are like that. But he sent them to the forest monastery, this hopeless case. And he went to this forest monastery. The Ajahn there, the teacher, just taught him simple meditation. Just breathing in, breathing out, buddho. That's all. And this young man had such a simple, clear and clean mind. It was the easiest thing in the world to meditate. Buddho, buddho, buddho. He just didn't think. And he soon got into all the jhanas, became one of the great monks of Thailand. It's a wonderful story. So if you've got a child who's not doing well at school, send him to my monastery. That can be a great teacher for the future. He may be a great meditator. The point of the story is that if you come top of the class or bottom of the class, it doesn't mean you're better or worse. That is conceit. Everybody has got their value in different ways. I was reading in a newspaper from England that research there has shown one of the highest paid professions in the UK, even you get more money than lawyers, are plumbers. Because everybody's gone to university or going to university these days. Everybody's in IT, in an office, and there's a terrible shortage of tradespeople, like plumbers. So much so that any plumber, they can quote their own price. And if you've got a leaking tap, or your plumbing doesn't work in the house, you've got no choice. You have to get the tradesperson in. So in UK, all these plumbers, they drive Mercedes. They've got their country houses. They're getting very wealthy. And so the article in the newspaper said, listen, Tony Blair in England is charging all these fees to send your children to university. Don't waste your money sending your kids to university. If you really are concerned with their future, give them an apprenticeship with a plumber. They'll make much more money than if they go to university. You won't have to spend so much on your children's education. You'll just turn them into a plumber. And also, you'll always have someone to come to fix your plumbing, your son. They say, if you care for your kids' education, don't send them to university. Make them into plumbers. And the point is that everybody is important in the world, even the plumbers, the bus drivers. When I went to my monastery in Australia the first time, you saw all these dead trees in the forest. And I wanted to take them down, because I thought they spoiled the beauty of the forest. But someone told me that those dead trees are important. In the hollows of the dead trees, that's where the possums live. In the hollows of the branches, where the branches have fallen off, that's where the birds nest. So those dead trees are just vital for the habitat of many beings who live in that forest. To take down those dead trees, you'll alter the ecosystem. And when I understood that, I realized that I had judged unfairly. I thought the one tree was better than the next. I didn't realize the value of the dead trees, or the bent trees, or the warped trees. Of course, I soon saw that's like in life. Sometimes we don't value people who we think aren't productive. The sick people, the bent people, the warped people. They're important too. In fact, they're vital for our life. Everybody is valuable. So there can't be any judgment now, no conceit left. No better, no worse. No saying that this tree is beautiful, that tree is ugly. All trees are beautiful. All people are valuable. That's the end of conceit. Okay, so if you have superpower consciousness, ego conceit disappears. You don't think you're better, you don't think you're worse, you don't even think you're the same. You just don't think in those ways anymore. You don't judge, you don't compare. If you do start comparing and judging, you lose all of your superpower mindfulness. If you get into a jhana and then you stand up and say, hey guys, I want all of the meditators here to know I just got into first jhana. You'll never get into it again for years. Conceit doesn't work. It blocks progress on the path. Okay? Next question. I was saying this yesterday. Dear Ajahn, where do you draw the line between illicit sex and non-illicit sex? 2, please give examples. 3, is sex between two singles who are in love but not married illicit? What about casual sex between two singles who are not married? Oh my goodness, I better be careful. Now, of course, when you talk about sex, everybody wakes up. Where do you draw the line with illicit sex and non-illicit sex? Oh my goodness. Okay, illicit sex and non-illicit sex. If you look at that third precept, it really depends on the time and place. Here on this retreat, all sex is illicit. That's why that I don't like this idea of Mahayana Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, Zen or Vajrayana. All sex is illicit. Come on, S-E-C-T-S, no sects. But I think you mean S-E-X here. In sex, illicit sex and non-illicit sex. Look, you have to go back to the original meaning of virtue. Is it going to hurt or harm somebody? And that's actually the basic rule of virtue which the Buddha gave to his son Rahula in the Rahula Wada Sutta. He said, son Rahula, to contemplate before you speak, before you do, but even before you think a thing. Is what I'm about to think, say or do for the harm and benefit of other beings, including myself, or is it for their harm? If it's for their harm, then don't do it. If it's for your harm, don't do it. But if on contemplating you realize that what you're about to think, to say, to do, is for the benefit and happiness of others or for yourself, then do it. It's a very beautiful basic premise where all virtue comes from. It is even more important than the 5 precepts. So we look at sex. Is it going to help or harm, or is it going to serve? In your relationship, your husband and wife is part of being married. So you do it compassionately, caringly, so there's your intimacy between the two of you. However, if it is not consensual, and you force sex on somebody else, obviously that, I would say, that is illicit. Or if it's on somebody who's not competent to give consent, such as someone who's underage, or someone who's depressed, or somebody who is sort of mentally disturbed for that period of time, again, it's not illicit, it's not real consent. So I would draw the line there. It has to be consensual, and it also has to be consent of a person who is able to give that consent. So if it's underage sex, like elderly people with a young person, certainly no. So it's also, they say, with gay sex, because people ask again, if it's gay sex, man with man, woman with woman, what's going on there? Again, according to Buddhism, is that going to harm or hurt someone? Or is it going to be for their well-being? And of course, I've looked at some of my disciples who are gay, and they're wonderful people. They are serving the community, they're great Buddhists, they keep their precepts, they look after everybody, they're compassionate, they meditate. And having looked at that, I cannot see anything wrong with gay relationships. with lesbian relationships, as long as they are committed and they're caring. In fact, I said this, I think, in an interview. I would compliment, I would acknowledge, and I would praise, like a gay relationship where the two men are committed to each other and caring to each other. I'd say you guys are much better than a husband who goes playing around with somebody else when they're married. Of the two, the one making the worst karma is a man who's got a wife who goes and has a mistress. That is illicit. That is wrong. The two gay people, a lesbian couple having a committed relationship, you're doing much better. So it's not whether it's heterosexual or homosexual sex. It's how you're doing it is the problem. So that's what illicit sex and non-illicit sex. Is sex between two singles who are in love but not married illicit? No, it's not, as long as it's consensual, as long as you have a relationship together. But look, is it going to harm or hurt the other person? It has to be consensual, the right time, the right place, with a bit of love, rather than just for lust. And what about casual sex between two singles who are not married? Again, if we say, no, it's terrible, it's bad, we're overemphasizing the act. There's many, many worse things people do. Then, you find a nice partner, you have lust, you're both consensual, you're both in your right mind, and you decide, yes, you have got no other partners. Obviously, you've got to look at the consequences, make sure, you have the condoms or the contraceptives beforehand, because sometimes casual sex, if you're not prepared, you end up with babies, and that's huge problems. And that's why sometimes people have the problem with abortion, simply because they weren't prepared. And there's all these terrible things in abortions. It's not an easy thing to decide upon. Either way, the woman who's pregnant has to suffer. The man can walk away, not always, but the woman is really suffering from that. So you have to be very caring and careful. So that's actually how you make those decisions. You have to figure out for yourself, is it going to harm or hurt someone? Or is it going to create happiness and well-being? You have to make that decision. You are human beings with lust. You're not monks. You're not sort of no vices. You have vices. You have to acknowledge those. The worst thing is that a monk can come up and say, no, you should all live like monks. You should all be celibate. You should all let go of all these things. And of course, all that means is you don't go to the temple anymore. You think, oh, these monks, they don't give advice which we can actually make use of in our life. You will have sex. I remember reading an article, someone asked Groucho Marx, one of the Marx brothers, the comedians, many years ago, they asked Groucho Marx, what do you think about sex? And he said, I think that sex is here to stay. So whether you want to or not, your kids will have sex. You will have sex. So let's actually be compassionate like the Buddha, be realistic, and let's make sure that the sex is not harmful. See of all the dangers which can happen there, and let's make sure we avoid those dangers. So let's make sure that, contraceptives, consensual, be careful of the consequences. If you're in a relationship, keep it within a relationship, not outside. Some years ago, when first year in my monastery in Thailand, there was the head teacher of the local school. And when it comes actually to people with status in the community, he was way up there, almost next to the monks and the headman of the village. He was a teacher. And he'd been in that school for many years. Everybody in that village had gone through him. So he was highly respected. And he would go to the brothel once a week. And people would actually say, you're breaking your precepts. And he would say, no, I'm not. And actually, he talked to us about that. And after consideration, we thought, hey, he's right. Because what had happened, he had a wife, but his wife, I'm not sure if it was some disease or what happened to her, was mentally incapacitated. All she could do was just basically lie around the house, She couldn't cook, she couldn't work,